Imagine having a child with different colored eyes who can remember his past life. Unbelievable, right? But this isn't just another isekai manga. Our protagonist awakens in a place resembling a castle. When he touches a shiny crystal ball, he's jolted by electricity. Opening his status menu, he finds out he holds the title of Demon King, though his luck and other stats are low. The only decent stat he has is agility. Realizing he's in another world because of his title, Demon King of another world, he understands that Demon Kings rule dungeons here. These dungeons are living entities, and he must enhance and develop his dungeon to protect it from invading humans and monsters. If the dungeon dies, he dies, and vice versa. They even share the same level. Reviewing his skills, he discovers he can use dungeon points to buy items from a gacha system, which can upgrade his dungeon. Despite his fear of his new appearance, he thanks the Dungeon Core Crystal Ball for giving him a new life. He stores his Demon King wings in his item box since they make sleeping difficult. After breakfast, he ventures out to explore the area around his dungeon. His peaceful exploration is interrupted when he spots some mushrooms and grass but is then confronted by a powerful dragon. He tries to explain that he means no harm, but the dragon tells him he's trespassing. Our protagonist is stunned as he realizes the dragon is speaking to him. He felt a wave of sickness when he realized that the dragon was a Supreme Dragon class with a staggering level of 987. Our boy Yuki was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. The dragon was ready to obliterate him, but Yuki quickly suggested they strike a deal since he was too weak to fight back. To win the dragon over, he pulled out a bar of chocolate, which the dragon found irresistible. Raising his finger, Yuki promised the dragon all the chocolate it desired, pitching it as a win-win situation. In response, the dragon transformed into a little girl with horns and a tail. She started yelling at Yuki for more chocolate. Before doing anything, Yuki took off his shirt so he wouldn't see her naked form. Back in Yuki's dungeon, the girl realized it was brand new. She told him that demons are always born in areas with high mana concentrations. Yuki gave her some chocolate, and since her full name was Leffy Tuss, he decided to call her Lei. Lei thought it was a good decision to wander into the dungeon because she met Yuki, with whom she made a sweet deal. She declared that she would continue to live in Yuki's dungeon. Yuki wasn't thrilled with the idea, but when Lei gave him puppy eyes, he couldn't say no. And that's how Yuki's dungeon got its first resident. While Lei slept, Yuki wanted to learn everything he could about the dungeon and how to operate its menu. He made some changes and was pleased with the results. He was also satisfied that Lei was treated as an intruder, earning him extra dungeon points he could use later. Yuki then tried the summoning menu and called forth a slime, which he played with for a bit. He was disheartened to find that the slime had a higher luck stat than he did. Just as the slime tried to comfort him, Yuki noticed a level 32 Cerberus approaching. In the next chapter, the slime stood bravely in front of Yuki, ready to protect him. However, Cerberus had no trouble swatting the slime away, slamming it against the dungeon wall. Furious, Yuki charged at the monster and killed it with a single kick. As the monster's blood splattered around him, Yuki realized his stats weren't as terrible as he thought. Despite being over 30 levels lower than Cerberus, he had gained 12 levels and unlocked a new skill called martial arts. Even though his stats were better than he'd imagined, Yuki knew he still didn't stand a chance against Lei. He quickly rushed to check on the slime, who was more than fine thanks to its regeneration skills. Realizing he couldn't let it fight again, Yuki returned to his room. After checking his status menu, he asked Lei to teach him some magic. Our boy Yuki, a die-hard Anon fan, immediately tried to use moves like Kamehameha or Zei Warudo from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. However, he quickly realized that magic didn't work like that. Lei asked if he had an analysis skill like hers. She explained that even though she could use it too, she didn't bother checking his status when they met because he seemed insignificant compared to her. Lei then asked for more chocolate, but Yuki warned her that eating too much would give her cavities. Instead, he offered her a pack of cookies, something Lei had never seen before. She tried one and was amazed by how delicious they were, feeling even happier about her decision to stay with Yuki. While she celebrated, Yuki tried to get her attention to talk about his magic stats. Lei told him his magic stat was higher than any monster in the southern forest. After devouring the entire bag of cookies, she agreed to teach Yuki magic, and he rewarded her with another bag of cookies. Lei promised she would turn him into the strongest magician. Lei began Yuki's training by holding his hands, letting him feel the mana flowing through his body. Yuki soon realized that the mana within him was different from the mana in the air. Lei assured him he was fine for now, explaining that if his body was weak and couldn't contain the mana, his head would explode. Yuki was terrified and furious that she hadn't warned him earlier, but Lei calmly explained she believed he'd be okay since he was a high-ranking demon. When Yuki tried manipulating his mana, Lei told him he had already mastered the basics. She instructed him to visualize things in detail. In a simple exercise, Yuki imagined a field of flowers and focused on picking one. After intense concentration, he managed to summon a flower in his hand. Lei knocked it away and told him not to be satisfied with that. They would try fire manipulation next. She instructed him to envision a flame. The first thing Yuki thought of was a matchstick, and he managed to create a flame at his fingertip. As he played with the fire, he got too excited, causing the flame to grow uncontrollably. He panicked, unable to stop it, but thankfully, Lei was there to stop the mana flow. She reminded him to be mindful of his power output and emphasized that visualizing magic in his mind was crucial. She mentioned he could use catalysts to aid his imagination if needed. Lei explained that besides the 4 elemental magics, there were also light, time, and dark magics. She noted that Yuki had an affinity for earth magic but encouraged him to try other types as well. Yuki attempted this and could only imagine warm bath water and a gentle breeze to dry his hair. Lei scolded him for thinking of such mundane uses for magic. Yuki considered using his magic differently, but decided to wash his hair instead. When Lei saw this, she asked if he could do the same for her hair. She got some shampoo in her eyes, which made her yell, but Yuki reminded her he had told her to close her eyes. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the haunted forest, 2 men were chasing a little girl who had stolen their belongings. They were too scared to pursue her into the forest, knowing an ancient dragon had become active recently. The girl managed to escape her pursuers, but, being so young, couldn't hold back her tears. The next morning, Yuki asked Leffy to watch over the dungeon while he was away. He reassured her that she wouldn't feel abandoned. He still couldn't fathom how a supreme dragon could be so fascinated by a Tamagotchi, which he had given her simply because it was the cheapest item in the gacha system. Yuki's reason for venturing outside the dungeon was to gather more information on how to earn more dungeon points. Knowing they had no visitors or intruders, he wanted to map out the area around the dungeon himself. He figured that with Leffa, his personal bodyguard, around, he didn't need to invest dungeon points in traps or monster summoning. Instead, he wanted to save up to improve the dungeon's appearance in the future. As he wandered through the forest, Yuki encountered various monsters. By sneaking around, he unlocked the stealth skill. He realized that he could learn new skills simply by performing actions related to them. The further he explored, the stronger the monsters became, making Yuki certain he had left Lei's territory. This was confirmed when he received a notification that his dungeon's range had expanded. Upon returning to his dungeon, Yuki headed straight to the kitchen he had bought a week earlier. However, the fridge he had stocked with meat was completely empty. The only possible culprit was Lei, who insisted she had done nothing wrong. The meat was simply too delicious for her to resist. Yuki completely lost his cool, calling her Drawn Lei. She defensively told him she could have just destroyed him and everything he held dear. However, when Yuki pointed out that doing so would mean the end of her snacks, Leffa fell to her knees, begging for his forgiveness. Realizing he had to fast that day, Yuki sighed. But then, Leffa disappeared and returned after some time with a pile of slain monsters for him to eat. Yuki scolded her for going overboard and even gave her a light smack. However, when he realized he could turn the monster corpses into dungeon points, he apologized and patted her head, forgiving her for eating all the meat in the fridge. The next day, Yuki ventured out once more, battling monsters to develop his skills. He was thrilled with how his mana sight skill allowed him to see the mana flow of his enemies even before they cast their spells. He thought to himself that it might be better to specialize in magic as a Demon King, even though he couldn't use fire magic since his first attempt. Yuki was pleased to see his dungeon points increasing much faster. While exploring the forest, he stumbled upon a little girl who had fainted from exhaustion. She was still alive but covered in wounds and injuries. Feeling a surge of compassion, Yuki decided to use a high-grade healing potion to treat her wounds.